Here's the question of the day. How many millions of times more will you have to undergo rebirth until you become a Buddha, until you reach nirvana, until you have an end of suffering for you and all sentient beings? Here is the Lotus Sutra's answer. By asking that question, you are expecting that your Buddhahood is achieved only after exhausting the millions of cycles of your rebirth. However, the Lotus Sutra's view on rebirth is different from this common expectation. The Lotus Sutra asks you, what if your Buddhahood has been already fulfilled throughout all of your millions of cycles of rebirth, including your present life cycle? Unlike in pre-Mahayana, nirvana is not the opposite of the rebirth cycle. Unlike the typical Mahayana view, nirvana is not just non-separate from rebirth. Rather, in the Lotus Sutra, true nirvana is nothing other than a full comprehension of nirvana. Nirvana is a mastery of rebirth. When you have a mastery of your given present moment, that's your Buddhahood moment. So which moment of your life will you master today? So this is what we're going to talk about today. So this video is a second part of my video series of 2 video series on the Buddhist idea of rebirth. If you haven't yet, please check out my video, Is Rebirth Good or Bad in Buddhism?, where I talked about how the concept is considered both in pre-Mahayana and Mahayana Buddhism. So today's video is about the Buddhist rebirth idea according to the Lotus Sutra. So let's check it out. Here is an agenda of our conversation. Number 1, what's going on in chapter 2 and after Lotus Sutra. Number 2, Shari Putra's joy in chapter 3. Number 3, forgetting and recalling your bodhisattva vow in chapter 10. Number 4, the mastery of rebirth at true nirvana in chapter 16 and beyond. Wow, so this agenda makes me feel that this video is kind of a crash course in the Lotus Sutra. And I will give you a comprehensive view as possible on the Lotus Sutra's take on the topic of the Buddhist idea of rebirth. And after watching this, I hope you'll feel that the Lotus Sutra's ideas are something more familiar to you and easier for you to practice in your everyday life. Okay, so let's dive into it. Number 1, what's going on in chapter 2 and after of the Lotus Sutra? So in chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra, Buddha Shakyamuni taught his audience that everyone he teaches is a bodhisattva. So this is a moment where the Buddha revealed the universal Buddha nature that is inherent to all sentient beings. Then in chapter 3 through 9 and beyond, Shravaka disciples understand the certainty of their own Buddhahood, and Shakyamuni gives them an assurance of Buddhahood. That's where you see a lot of references of the idea of rebirth. And number 2, Shari Putra's joy in chapter 3. So about this reference, for instance, let's look at the case of Shari Putra, one of the 10 disciples of the Buddha. So Shakyamuni talks to Shari Putra in that chapter about his rebirth in the great past and the great future of the Lotus Sutra. So he says, my past life, I now declare that since long ago, in the presence of 20,000 million Buddhas, I've constantly been teaching and transforming you for the sake of the unsurpassable way. But you remember none of that now, because I want you to recall the way that in the past you originally vowed to follow. I now expound, for the sake of all Shravakas, this great vehicle sutra called the Lotus Flower of the Wondrous Dharma. And about the future life, Shakyamuni says to Shari Putra, in an age to come, after the passing of infinite, boundless, and inconceivable kalpas, after you have paid homage to thousands of 10,000s and millions of Buddhas, honored and received the true Dharma and completely attained the Bodhisattva way, you will become a Buddha named Radiant Blossom Tathagata. So Shari Putra will undergo uncountable times of rebirth until he becomes a Buddha called Radiant Blossom Tathagata. So what a beautiful name. By the way, this can be a good candidate for your child's name, perhaps. Good morning, Radiant Blossom. Anyways, but the key here is to say that the unending rebirth is something promised in the original vow that Shari Putra was supposed to make in the ancient past life. So let's pay attention to Shakyamuni's words here. He says, I want you to recall the way that in the past you originally vowed to follow. This is enigmatic. What kind of vow is this? So this leads us to the chapter 10 of the Lotus Sutra. So number 3, forgetting and recalling your bodhisattva vow in chapter 10. All right, so in chapter 10, Shakyamuni says, if my good sons and good daughters receive, embrace, read, recite, expound, or copy even a single phrase of the Dharma Flower Sutra and pay homage to it, these people themselves are great bodhisattvas who have attained supreme perfect awakening. Filled with heartfelt sympathy for living beings, they have vowed to be born among them in order to widely proclaim and clearly expound the wondrous Dharma Flower Sutra. They give up the reward of purified karma of their own accord and are born in an evil age in which they widely expound this sutra. So the original vow was to be born among humans to expound the teachings of the Lotus Sutra. So that's the vow Shari Putra and other Shravakas made in their past life and forgot in the present life. So Shari Putra danced to joy in chapter 3 in the beginning of it, because he clearly recalled and embraced this vow as his bodhisattva commitment. So Shari Putra danced to joy because he's like a present life cycle, his future Buddhahood, and the original vow he made in the ancient past all matched up with each other, and all of them converge in this present life. So Shari Putra's present became eternal present, where all moments, life, present, and the future and the past all converge upon in one single suchness of time. That's the eternal present, which is inspired by the chapter 16 of the eternal life as the Buddha idea. So Shariputra's present became an eternal present in that sense. And in this sense, rebirth was something desired. And each rebirth makes up a process of the fulfillment of his bodhisattva vow. So what is also important appears in a couple pages down in the same chapter. About these people, as stated above, Shakyamuni says, you should know that such people as these, who are free to be born wherever they choose, are able, even in an evil age, to expound the unsurpassable Dharma widely. So did you see when it says, who are free to be born wherever they choose? This is so crucial to me. So they're not just desiring rebirth, but they are free to choose where to be born. So this unlimited choice of any realms to be born, realms of rebirth, is actually the Buddha's virtue. So that said, let's finally take a look at how it is stated in chapter 16. So number 4, mastery of rebirth at true nirvana in chapter 16 and beyond. Okay, so chapter 16 is where Shakyamuni Buddha announces that his death is approaching, and it is where it has a famous reference of the Buddha's eternal life. But in that reference, you see also that Shakyamuni reveals himself both in the forms of presence and absence, for the sake of helping all sentient beings to walk on the bodhisattva way. So in the chapter, Shakyamuni says, for instance, I may appear as myself, I may appear as someone else. Birth and death do not live in the threefold world or appear in it. There's no staying in the world or departing from it for extinguishment. It is neither substantial nor insubstantial, and it is neither thus nor otherwise. This is how the threefold world sees itself, but the Tathagata sees things as these clearly and without error. I've never abandoned the work of a Buddha, not even for a moment. So saying there's no staying in the world or no departing from it, that means there's no primacy of value between what is visible and what is not visible, being present and being absent. So this eternal Buddha Shakyamuni is omnipresent and so is inconceivable. But there's no way to capture it as either present or either simply absent. So presence and absence are alternate modes of how this omnipresent Buddha manifests itself. So it can be present in the mode of absence as well. So this is where our point of chapter 10 is linked up, where we saw Bodhisattva in the Lotus Sutra are free to choose to be born anywhere, any realms. So the Buddha in chapter 16 gets a further step beyond than this notion by revealing its presence everywhere. So there's no presence or absence or no nirvana or no rebirth in chapter 16. So that means Buddhahood is actualized everywhere in the mode of absence, in the mode of presence, in the mode of nirvana, and sometimes in the mode of rebirth. So now in the Lotus Sutra, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas freely choose to be born according to the needs and desires of all sentient beings. So in this sense, Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are the masters of rebirth. So in the Lotus Sutra, in that sense, nirvana means nothing other than the mastery of rebirth. So undergoing each moment of your life is how your bodhisattva practice is taking place. So that's why the sutra says, I have never abandoned the work of the Buddha, not even for a moment. And then the chapter is followed by many examples of bodhisattvas practices from chapter 20 and on. So with this, the Lotus Sutra seems to be suggesting that your Buddhahood is nothing other than your mastery of each moment of your everyday experience. That's the mastery of each moment of your encounter with others. So which moment of your life will you master today?